I might not fully understand that the way this frame rail collapses could affect the timing of the airbags. And
There was a point in time where if you were a student and if you weren't destined for that four-year university, that a lot of times you were kind of written off, right?
it might sound silly, but you're creating a product.
Yep, we are.
And you want to create the best product possible.
We know the best way to train for work is to use real-world work, and that's why it's so important to expose the students to that real-world work, what you'll be doing.
Yeah. Anybody in the collision industry with experience could get another job tomorrow. Welcome back to the greatest blue-collar podcast in the world. Today I'm sitting down with Mr. Don Pohl, the president of Rankin Technical College. We're going to talk about all the different trades, how he has been at the school for, I think, roughly 20 years, and how trades have evolved and how we need more people in the trades in order to help all the different trades in the world that are drastically struggling to get more people, more technicians, whatever field it might be. They're all having a hard time right now. So welcome, Don. Thanks for sitting down with me today. First question I have for you is, coincidentally, last night, I live in Eureka, Missouri, for everybody that doesn't know, which is about 20 miles west of St. Louis. And I was looking through a newspaper. Usually I just throw these newspapers away, but this one was sitting on the counter last night, and I saw a section in there that was talking about how Eureka High School is spending, this summer they're supposed to be adding a $500,000 section onto their metal section of the school, welding in their metal department, because they want to help push more trades at the high school. And I'm curious, how much of a role do schools promoting trades influence people going to a technical college such as Rankin?
Sure. So first off, thank you for inviting me here, right?
Absolutely.
I'm excited to be here. You've been a great support to Rankin Technical College, and I'm very proud to have you as a graduate of Rankin Technical College.
Sure.
So to answer your question, it's huge. So when we actually look at convincing somebody to go into a technical career, especially if they want to go to technical college, there's really two people we have to sell that on, right? First off, we have to sell it on the student. And usually that's a pretty easy sale only because students love hands-on, right? They love doing. They love, we know students learn best by doing, right? Not by just reading, writing, and talking about whatever it is, but by actually doing it.
Sure.
So selling that concept of going into a technical career to a student is usually pretty easy because they like to work with their hands. Of course, it's a harder sell when you have to sell it to the influencer or the parent. And we know that, of course, mom is still the number one influencer, but teachers and counselors are number two. Dad is a little bit farther down that line,
Really?
believe it or not. Yeah.
Interesting.
So when you say how big of a deal is it, it's actually a pretty big deal when you have schools, teachers, counselors that are telling students, hey, this is a viable option. Go into a technical career, whether it be into the automotive, manufacturing, construction, whatever it may be. Students listen to their teachers, their counselors, and their schools, and moms. Moms are very, very important. So it's great that these programs are into the high schools and into the schools, so the students at least have an access. It's very important that students can at least experience what a technical career is, so they can make a decision. Do I want to go to a four-year university? Do I want to go into a technical career? And if they have no idea, when you talk about machining, for example, instrumentation and process control, a lot of times students, unless they've had some sort of family, that have been in that career field, they'll have no idea what that is. So at least getting introduced to that through the schools are very, very important.
Interesting. So is that a study that was done as far as the dad being less influential than the mom?
It was, and I don't know how long ago that was, but I do remember that mom was still the number one influencer, and teachers and counselors are up there at number two.
That's fascinating.
I only remember the dad is farther down below that because, of course, I am a dad. So it's like, oh, that makes sense. If you want to convince, go to mom, go to teachers, go to counselors.
Gotcha.
So,
that's interesting.
Of course, I'm sure that's not true for everyone, but
Sure. Just in general, I wonder if when dads work in the trades, blue collar dads, for example, I wonder if that tends to be more influential than in that aspect.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, especially when, again, when you look at somebody even knowing what's available in the trades. That, oh, I can make a career out of welding. I can make a career out of collision repair. I can make a career out of, fill in the blank. I'm sure that there is, again, a strong influence. And if dad, uncle, grandpa, brother, somebody in the family has done that, there's a better chance that they're going to follow in their footsteps. And I'll also say, moms do that too, right? So,
sure.
I listed off a group of people who are typically male, but in a lot of cases, there's a huge opportunity for females in the technical careers as well. So when mom has followed that track, that's important for the kids, sons and daughters, whoever, to also pursue a career. So, yeah, it always helps when at an early age, the students are introduced at least into, what is a blue-collar job? And how can I pursue that? What's the path to get from where I'm at now to making a living in a blue-collar job?
Now, have you seen, let's just say in the last 10 to 20 years, have you seen an increase in females going into blue-collar trades?
Yes, but not enough. Not enough, right? So historically, it's always been, if you look at the population of Rankin and the student breakdown, it's always been, 95-5, 95% male, 5% female.
That sounds like, that's what it felt like whenever I was there.
Yeah, and it's been like that for a long time. So we've done some things. We've made a concerted effort to move that needle. And I'm proud to say, we've moved it to 93% male, 7% female. And it's only a couple percentage points, but yet it took a lot to move it. And it's important because, there's so many opportunities. And I think the population of the United States is somewhat like 55 or 57% female. So the majority is female. So unless we figure out how to get more females into technical careers, the math's never going to work. We're never going to be able to fill those jobs. And that has a big picture impact, because if you can't fill those jobs, I get a chance to talk to a lot of industry. And time again, when I'm talking to industry and especially trying to attract them to the St. Louis, Missouri area, and we say St. Louis, that's a 100-mile radius, right? Whether it's Eureka or whatever, it's like, we all claim we're from St. Louis.
Is that generally your target market?
Yes and no. We actually recruit from many states, but most of our students come from a 100-mile radius, right? So when you actually start looking at, you've got all these job opportunities, and sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
So you've got all these job opportunities, and when you're trying to attract industry into this area to grow the economy, a lot of times companies, they'll say, I'm not going to move there because I can't find a technical workforce. And if I can't find a technical workforce, I can't grow. And if I can't grow, the economy doesn't grow. Yeah. So I think it's very important for the economy. It's very important for the area to be able to attract more people into technical careers, which means we have to figure out how to get more diverse people into technical careers, which, again, for us, that definitely includes females.
Sure, makes sense. And I remember learning this when I was at Rankin, as far as automotive painting goes, painting cars.
Yeah.
I was taught at Rankin, and it's still true to this day, that females actually have a better eye for color match.
Yeah. For
matching colors, they have a much better eye than males do.
Overall, generally, females typically have more attention to detail, right? Yeah. And I will tell you, in the collision industry or any industry, plumbing, HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, it doesn't matter. A lot of times the customer is a female, and the customer wants to deal with somebody that looks like them, somebody that can relate to them. So, the moms that are trying to get their cars fixed, they want to talk to a female technician or a female service representative.
Sure.
So it's again, you're right. Better color matching, more attention to detail, more patience. Yeah. All of those things.
And I could see that because lots of people that aren't familiar with cars, if they go to a repair shop, they often are uncomfortable because they think they're going to get sold on lots of extra stuff that's not necessary. And that's usually females that tell me that.
Yeah.
And usually the males are like, don't let them sell you anything. Don't let them,
absolutely.
I've told my mom that before and everything else. And, but I could see that if it's a female talking to a female, I could see that.
It's just a comfort level.
A little more trust in a way. Not that guys are not trustworthy, but comfort. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's again, I think, diversity. We want everybody to feel like they're included in all these careers. And it is. There's no career that we represent that a female cannot be successful in.
Sure. 100%. Yeah. It's just an image that has gotten falsely put into society in a way, unfortunately.
You're right. Historically, I think there's a picture of the trades.
Yeah.
And some people even look at that as a bad word, right?
100%.
But there's a vision of the trades, and it's just not that way anymore. Even in your industry, there's a point in time when it's like, oh, you mentioned painting, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh my gosh, that's an unhealthy career. You're going to go in there and breathe all those fumes, and I hope that you realize in 10 years you're not going to be able to breathe anymore. It's like, well, the safety precautions, the personal protection equipment, manufacturing, those industries, they've made leaps and bounds in making it healthy for everyone. Yep. So it's not manufacturing, automotive. It's not what it used to be. It's not the world that
and we
grew up in.
Yeah, a lot of parents are probably scared of that. They're scared. Oh, I don't want you painting cars. You're gonna breathe all these fumes, but as long as you use proper protection like you're trained to do, not saying everybody does, but as long as you follow the right steps, it should never be an issue.
I noticed in a lot of your videos, you're welding, for example, and it's like it used to be, oh my gosh, if you're welding, you're going to lose your eyesight. It's like, well, hold on a second. Again, if you're trained to do it right, it's very safe, and it's very important that you do it right. Yeah. So it is healthy, and every job has risks, right? But again, we try to mitigate those risks by teaching our students the appropriate way, the safe way, and the right way to do it. Yeah. And we see industry mimicking that and doing that as well. Industry they want it done right.
Sure. And at the same time, sitting behind a desk all day in a white collar job, there's risks there too.
There's lots of risk there. Absolutely. Like I said, I think every career has risk.
Yeah. But that could be hard on your back. You're not getting exercise.
Exactly.
There's
fresh air, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
100%.
Absolutely.
So there's risk to every job you could possibly do. It just depending on what it is going to change the risk factor of it.
Absolutely.
But now you mentioned businesses coming to St. Louis but needing workers. At Rankin, do you ever have a large company that wants to come into St. Louis and come and talk to you guys and discuss like what's the potential of us getting workers? Is it worth us coming to St. Louis?
Yeah. So we do. We talk with, and it's not just St. Louis. Realize we've been in St. Louis since 1907, so very rich history. But we have a location in Wentzville, Missouri. We've recently opened up a location in Troy, Perryville, Missouri, and Ashland, Missouri. So ultimately, we'll work a lot of times individually with the company, but then also most of those communities have an economic development arm where they've got a group of people that go out and it's their job to try to convince companies to come to this area to open up a facility, to increase employment and things like that. So a lot of times we'll be invited to those meetings with those economic development organizations to just say, hey, these are the opportunities, this is Rankin, this is what we'll do to help you. Again, fill that technical workforce need,
Do you guys ever consider adding or expanding a program specifically if a large company is coming to the area?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of times, that's a great question, Kyle, that you bring up. A lot of times people will ask, well, how do you know what to teach? And time again, we are industry driven. So industry tells us what to teach. I get asked all the time, well, why don't you teach this? And my answer is, well, just because we're not doing it doesn't mean we won't. It typically means we haven't been asked to do it. So if there's recently in Wentzville, for example, we've partnered with a company called Votech. So we actually have a working hydrogen hub at our Wentzville facility. And if you would have asked me, 5 years ago, would you have gotten into the hydrogen industry? It's like, when I think of hydrogen, the Hindenburg, it's like, no, I don't think that's something that we want on campus. But with this company coming through and saying, hey, if hydrogen is going to be accepted, the infrastructure has to be there, which number one, you've got to have hydrogen. Well, they do that. They produce hydrogen. But part of that infrastructure is also a technical workforce to support that, right? So if you've got a hydrogen vehicle or a hydrogen fork truck or whatever it may be, you want to know that when it breaks down, somebody's going to be there to fix it and fix it safely. It can't be down. So where are you going to get the technicians? Well, that's what we do. So you come to Rankin and we create a training program specifically to meet those needs.
Makes sense.
So we're industry driven.
That's just like you guys have like the Toyota program in automotive. I'm sure that was because Toyota, there was a need for it.
Yeah.
Toyota probably talked to you guys and you put that together.
Well, and that's an interesting point. So yeah, the Toyota T10 program, we've been a Toyota T10 training program for at least the last 40 years, right? And I will tell you, that program has changed many, many times over the years. And not only do they help us determine what to teach within that T10, because it's of course driven by Toyota and Lexus, but they then also work with us on how to teach it. So that program, very similar to what we've done. In fact, kind of done it with Toyota before we did it with some of the other programs, including collision, where there's now a rotation where students are at school for 8 weeks and then they rotate out into the industry for 8 weeks. And we can talk more about that. But that was really driven by industry coming to us and saying, they had a problem. So Toyota and Lexus, they make wonderful vehicles. Great Toyotas, great Lexus. Yep. Believe it or not, they don't make a lot of money when they sell that vehicle. They practically give that vehicle away. Where they make the money is when the customer brings that vehicle back to get serviced.
Sure.
So when you go to these wonderful dealerships and they have a service center, you look at those service centers and the challenge is, I don't know where I'm going to get the next workforce. Everybody's there is either retiring or past retirement. So they said, hey, what are you going to do? How can you help us get that next workforce? And we said, not a problem. What we'll do is we'll go out to the career centers. We'll go out to the high schools. There's tons of great high schools and career centers right here in the St. Louis area. We'll recruit. We'll say, hey, who wants to be a Toyota technician? Who wants to be a Lexus technician? We'll bring them to Rankin. We'll spend 2 years with them. And then after 2 years, we'll line the Toyota technicians up on a shelf. The service managers and the dealerships can come pick their Toyota technician up off the shelf, take them back to work. Milk and honey will flow from the sky and everything will work out great. And they said, that's not going to work. We can't wait 2 years. Right. We have a problem now. So now what we do is we literally pair the potential Toyota technician or Lexus technician up with a dealership before they ever start Rankin. And at that point in time, we bring them into Rankin. We teach them what we call maintenance light repair, how to change oil, how to check tire pressure, how to do those things that you would typically find in that quick oil
entry level
change.
Type of stuff.
Sure. Enough to make them a productive member of the shop.
Sure.
We teach them that in 8 weeks, and then they go out and they work as a productive member of that shop for 8 weeks. And after that, and it's a paid internship, they'll come back to Rankin and they'll learn the next skill set. Maybe it's steering and suspension. Then they'll go back out and they'll work. So it's 8 weeks at Rankin, 8 weeks at the shop, 8 weeks at Rankin, 8 weeks at the shop. And we found that to be a win-win-win. And here's what I mean. Number one, for the dealers, for the employer, right? It's a try before you buy. I'm going to tell you, I'm sure you've interviewed people, you've looked at resumes, and it looks like a great fit. And then you hire that person for whatever reason, they don't fit into the culture, they don't fit into the environment.
Sure.
Well, it's a lot easier to call Rankin up and say, hey, don't send that intern back versus trying to fire a full-time employee.
Sure.
So it's a try before you buy for the employer. It's also a try before you buy for the student too. So everybody in the automotive program, they think they want to turn a wrench for the rest of their life. And then they find out that the car, it only breaks down when it's hot, when it's cold, when it's wet, when it's dirty. The car never breaks down on the showroom floor. Yeah. So everybody who thinks they want to turn a wrench, they may not really want to turn a wrench once they start doing it. We all know somebody who's gone through an educational experience. Maybe it's a 2-year program, maybe it's a 4-year program, maybe it's longer, and they're not doing what they were trained to do because when they got out there and started doing it, it wasn't what they expected. Yeah. Well, here, worst case scenario, the students wasted 1 semester's worth of time and tuition, and they actually get to experience that real world work. So if they don't want to do it, they can exit out and move on to find out what they do want to do. It's just as important sometimes to know what you do want to do as what you don't want to do. Right. So at that point, it's a win for them as well because they get to, again, try before you buy. For Rankin, number one, we pride ourselves in our industry relationships. So we've got a great relationship with these industries, and a lot of times we'll get, if we're working with Toyota, they'll tell us what's coming up and make sure that the techs are prepared to work on that before the public even knows about it in a lot of cases. Plus, if you go to the doctor, and you go to my doctor, they check my vitals, and they're going to check my blood pressure and my cholesterol and my blood sugar level and all these things. But the first thing my doctor checks is my heartbeat. And if I don't have a heartbeat, the rest of those things are irrelevant, right? I'm dead. It doesn't matter. All the medicine in the world's not going to help. Well, our heartbeat at Rankin is what we call our job placement rate. And we celebrate the fact that 98% of our graduates are placed within their chosen career field within 6 months of graduation. And that's not bagging groceries or flipping burgers. Those are nice jobs, but those are not technical careers, right?
Sure.
So again, 98% of our students are placed within their chosen career field within 6 months of graduation. Well, with these programs, and that's our heartbeat of Rankin, you know, with these programs, these students are placed before they ever start. So I've got a 100% job placement rate. So, you know, again, that tells me that if they're placed and they're being, you know, successful, then we are doing the right thing. We're training them on the right thing so they're able to go out and be productive members of these shops.
Sure. And I believe I read a statistic a few years back that I think it's over 50%. This isn't related just to technical schools. It's all colleges in general. I think over 50% of people are working in industries that are not related to their degree at all.
I believe
whatsoever.
that. I believe that. I think a lot of people, you know, they're not sure what they want to do. You know, we know the best way to train for work is to use real world work. And that's why it's so important to expose the students to that real world work, what you'll be doing.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic.
Even when you were there, you know, you were doing that work before you ever went out there, but you got exposed to it.
Sure.
You know,
but at that time, we didn't have the 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off at the time.
We were manufacturing the work, right? So what we would do is we would acquire a vehicle, whether it be from a junkyard or from, you know, luckily we work with a lot of great insurance agencies where they would donate a totaled car.
Sure.
And then you would work that car through the cycle, right? You know,
Right.
you do the estimating, you do the mechanical, the non-structural, the structural, the painting or finishing. And at the end of the day, we had a car that you took from a total to, okay, we're a licensed auto dealer. We would resell that car.
Sure.
So, you know, you'd put it back on the road and make it safe.
Right.
Which is important.
Yeah. I'll say that when I was there, we did have the opportunity. I remember I got to shadow at 3 or 4 times at different body shops. Yep. And I remember doing that and just getting my foot just for that day, those 3 or 4 days, made a big difference just for me to actually see what the real world was like.
Yeah.
So being able to actually be employed by a business for 8 weeks, you know, on and off is fantastic.
And I think that's important because, again, I think if you weren't sure what you were getting into and then you went through this program 2 years in length or however long it is, and then you get exposed, it's like, oh, you know, this is not what I signed up for.
Sure.
So I do think in some cases that's why you see so many students that are not doing what they were trained to do.
Sure.
And the other thing is it's so important to have those industry relations because it changes so frequently, right? I mean, if you look at, even in your industry, how you repair a car today is so more complicated and so different than what it used to be.
100%.
So I think as long as you know what you're getting into and you're disciplined enough to stay, you know, a lot of times people will say, well, what's the hardest thing you teach at Rankin? You know, ultimately, and this is across all of our programs. We've got about 37 different programs there. The hardest thing that we have to teach is how to teach yourself. Because at the end of the day, when you graduate and you go out and you start doing that, Rankin's not there anymore, right? I mean, we're not there guiding you with objectives and competencies. Now it's you. And you have to have that want, that desire, that discipline to stay up to speed within your industry.
Sure. And part of Rankin's goal is to prepare people the best they possibly can
It is.
that. But that's, like you said, there's only so much you could do.
Yeah, it's our mission. It's our educational formula. You know, our mission, we are a private non-for-profit. A lot of people don't realize that. We're a private non-for-profit degree-granting institution of higher learning. We're accredited by the Higher Learning Commission, the same accrediting agency that accredits, you know, Mizzou and SIU and Washington University. They accredit us as well, so it's a real college. Our primary mission is to provide the comprehensive education and training necessary to prepare students for employment and advancement in a variety of technical career fields. Now, regardless of what career field you look at Rankin, we carry that mission out with a 3-part educational formula, which includes technical education. And when students sign up to come to Rankin or when employers hire a Rankin grad, it's just assume that they're going to be technically competent, that they have those technical skills. Sure. We also require the students to go through general education. Yeah. And I'll ask you, since you're a Rankin grad, you know, why do we do the general education?
Why do you do it?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly.
a lot of times people say, oh, you do it because you're that quote unquote real college. And that's a true statement. However, that's not really why we do it. We do it because industry tells us, employers tell us, they want employees who can read, write, and communicate. They want employees who have an appreciation for lifelong learning, realizing that, again, this is just the first step in a technical career, right? So it's important that we instill those general education skills. And then, of course, the third part of our educational formula is work ethic. And we define that as the employability skills that every employer wants in an employee. We actually have 5 core work ethic traits that include professionalism, positive attitude and approach, respect for workplace structure, the ability to get along with others, and honesty. Putting craftsmanship in your work. So
that's more important than everything else in my opinion.
It really is. And I'll tell you, we've had students who have passed the technical classes, they've met the gen ed requirements, but because they did not meet that work ethic standard, they didn't graduate from Rankin. That's how serious we take it. So, and you're right, because employers have told us, and all of those, technical education, general education, work ethic, industry tells us, hey, this is what the students need to be able to do to graduate and be successful in this career field. Because, you can have the best technician, the person that knows how to fix everything, but if they can't communicate that, and if they don't show up to do that, it's a complete waste, right?
I just talked about that on the last podcast I did too. Same conversation.
I got a chance to listen to the podcast with Gene and with John, and I'll echo everything that they say. Everything that they say, the advice about the showing up. Vince Lombardi. Gene mentioned him. Absolutely right. It's absolutely right. You got to show up. In fact, we've got employers who they'll hire graduates who, they might not have made the best grades, but they showed up. They had great work ethic, because we give grades for work ethic on the transcript. They look at that well above the grades that they've earned in their quote-unquote academics, right? Because if they show up, we can mold them into that. Realizing, again, the technical skills are going to change. But those core work ethic traits, that's been there since we started in 1907. It's just so very, very important.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like Rankin has maintained those old school ethics that up into this day that maybe society hasn't kept totally like they should. But
yeah, you're right, and we realize that.
It's a good thing though.
It is a great thing, but I'll tell you, our approach is this. Just like when you started, we assumed. And you were a great student, by the way. You were an easy student, right? You came to us with a lot of skills. You came to us with the work ethic already.
Sure.
But in a lot of times, you come to us, it's like, oh, we have to teach you how to get into the collision engineering, collision repair industry. There's some students that come to us, and we do have to teach them work ethic because they haven't been exposed to that.
Right.
They might have been told that you have to be on time, but then the school systems didn't hold them accountable. So it's a little bit of a culture shock, because we're very, hey, this is what to expect, and then we hold you accountable to those expectations. So we realize that in the beginning, hey, it's learning, it's teaching. We're going to try to expose you and hold you accountable, make sure you understand what our expectations are. But then by the time you graduate, we're pretty serious about this. We're not going to tolerate much.
Sure.
So just like the technical skills, we teach the general education skills and the work ethic skills as well.
So can let's say a otherwise perfect student that's at Rankin that can't show up on time most days, can they get kicked out of the school for constantly being tardy?
So maybe kicked out is not the right word, because when we say that, they kick themselves out, right?
Okay.
At the end of the day, we put these expectations there.
Fair.
Can a student kick themselves out because they're not showing? Absolutely.
Gotcha.
We have attendance standards. We're again, and you know this, anytime you're in a technical career, you've got to be disciplined enough to follow the safety standards. You've got to be disciplined enough to get along with others. You can't, horseplay, and maybe that's an antiquated term too, right?
Sure.
And expect to be safe, because there's real dangers there. So we take it very seriously. We expect you to behave appropriately. We hold you accountable for attendance. We expect you to have a positive attitude and approach. We expect you to be professional. We expect you to get along with others, and we expect you to be honest.
Sure.
And if you don't demonstrate those things, then absolutely you will not be able to continue your education. You will not graduate from Rankin. That's how serious we take it. So, and you know that.
Yeah.
I don't know
like that when I was there.
I don't know how many students started in your class, and I don't know how many students graduated out of that, but I'm sure you watched other students who didn't show up, who didn't dress appropriately, or who didn't use the appropriate language, who didn't treat others with respect, right?
Sure.
You got to respect others. You got to respect the institution. And if you didn't do that, you didn't see them at graduation, right?
Yeah, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I would say if there was about 30 people in my class, probably half of them graduated. Yeah. It's my guess. And in my eyes, rightfully so.
Yeah.
Some of them just clearly didn't know what they were getting into.
Yeah, and the challenge, the art of education is, okay, out of those that didn't succeed that first time, because I'll tell you, there's nothing wrong with having to repeat a semester, right?
Sure.
I mean, you didn't get this the first go around. There's nothing wrong with having to repeat it. That shows that you're growing, you're learning. I get that. How do we spark that interest as educators? How do we spark that interest? How do we take those students and turn them into the blue collar Kyles, right? How do we take that? Because again, they haven't had your experiences. Maybe they didn't have your opportunities. They didn't take the initiative to create their opportunities, or whatever it is. There's a lot of excuses. So how can we spark them though and turn that? What's the switch that you can flip that will take that student who isn't successful right out of the gate and then make them successful?
Sure.
And the real hard thing of teaching is the answer is different in some cases for every student, right? Whatever sparks that interest may be different. So it's our job as educators to figure out what that spark is and then capitalize upon that.
Makes sense. Do you guys, do any of your instructors ever go through any psychological programs to figure out how to work with students differently?
Yeah.
Or is that,
there is quite a bit of training.
No.
No, you're not making that up at all. That's a real thing, and we
that is a real
absolutely
thing.
Yeah. So it's the professional development, even dealing with different personalities. Mm-hmm. Classroom management is very important. So first off, I'll tell you, all of our instructors, we pride ourselves in hiring. Again, what makes Rankin successful? It's the people. Our faculty, our staff are absolutely the best faculty and staff in the world. Rankin is, the brick and mortars. We wouldn't be what we are, again, since 1907, if it wasn't for the people teaching. Even with you, if I ask you, what do you remember about Rankin? You're probably going to tell me the faculty that you had. You're not going to tell me, the president or the vice president or the administration. Granted, we're very important to provide the resources, but the real meat and bones is the faculty doing their job.
The people you're working with every day.
And we typically hire professionals out of industry because, again, it's much easier to take a professional and turn them into a teacher versus hiring a teacher and then turn them into a professional in the collision industry, for example.
That'd be very difficult.
It would be very difficult because it takes years and years and years.
And they would never have that real world experience.
Exactly.
It's almost vital to have.
It is. So all of our faculty have that real world experience. And then what we do is we try to provide the resources to them to take them from that industry expert and then turn them into the teachers, right? Turn them into somebody that can take that information and then pass that along to our students, to coach them, to mentor them. And that's changing. The students today, they learn differently than the students of yesterday. It's amazing. Again, we've got great faculty, but we also have great students.
Yeah.
It really is.
Technology is so different.
It is.
While I was at Rankin, I remember that was the time period that our program, the collision program, started doing stuff. I think it was called Inside Rankin or the online.
Yeah, absolutely.
While I was there, I think it was my second year was when that started.
Yeah.
And so that was the very beginning of doing anything online.
Yeah.
Now I assume it's probably mostly all done online.
It is, and I will tell you, and I'll give a shout out to some of the great high schools that we work with in the career centers, South Tech, North Tech, Lewis and Clark, and I will tell you, I know in their classroom, blue collar Kyla's there. Your YouTube videos, your Instagram, they're using that as teaching tools.
Sure.
So again, I don't know that even you realize the impact that you had on the education industry, because what you're doing really has changed what these schools can do and how these students learn information. So
I know I get
you're a teacher and you don't even know it, right? I mean, you really are.
I get instructors and students from all over the country sending me. I have students taking pictures of them watching my videos in class and stuff like that. That was never my goal.
Yeah,
but it's cool. I appreciate it.
What is cool, and I'll tell you, I think you've done an amazing thing for the industry.
Thank you.
I know a lot of times you'll ask, how can you bring respect back to the blue collar?
Right.
And I think there's several things to do that. Number one, I think just educating people about what blue collar jobs are. And I'll use collision as an example. So, you go out and you buy a new vehicle, and you're going to put your family in that vehicle, and you're going to drive down the road at the speed limit, of course, and something's going to happen, whether it's your fault, somebody else's fault. That vehicle is designed and engineered to protect its occupants.
Yep.
And hopefully it does its job, and it gets wrecked. So now I'm going to take that vehicle to you, and you, in your industry, I'm expecting you as the customer to put that vehicle right back to specs so that when I take it and put my family back in it and it gets into another collision, it's got to perform the exact same way. And you know that if you don't follow the rules, the regulations, you don't do it exactly right, these families, their lives are in your hands because of what you do. So I don't know that people understand, the importance of that blue collar job.
Right.
I think just if you look at it from that perspective, you got to respect the technician that is doing that, because again, I'm relying upon, my entire family is relying upon you doing your job the right way every day. Yep. Otherwise that car fails and it doesn't operate right. So I think that's important. Number one is realizing what these careers really entail. I think the second thing is you. And what I mean by that, and I've said this time again, I wish I could have a whole team of blue collar Kyles. and here's what I mean by that. So I can say whatever I want, but you make your industry cool. Yeah. You said it yourself.
That
kids
was the
are
goal.
watching, and you've been very successful at that. So when people think it's cool, they think you're cool. They're going to listen to you. You're an influencer in so many ways, and I think that brings respect to that blue collar job, especially like we talked about earlier, for those people who have no idea what that career is. So they relate to you, they trust you, they look up to you. And you've created this career for yourself that you can't turn off, right?
Right.
No matter where you're at, on or off, people recognize you now, and they look up to you and they say, oh, well, I'm going to mimic this, or I'm going to do this. So I absolutely love the fact that, you do what you do at your job. And if I hope I never have to use your service, right? Because that means that something's happened to a car. But if I do, I would prefer to have you fix it. Because I've seen in your videos, you're tearing apart something and you're looking at this and you're like, oh my gosh, somebody else has been in here and they didn't do what they were supposed to do because it just got hidden. It got sealed up and they didn't put the appropriate caulking. And again, I'm not in your industry, so excuse my ignorance for the terminology, but you're doing it the right way because number one, you're videotaping it, right? It's there forever. Right. So it's like you're taking your job to the next level. You're putting yourself out there under a microscope. And I enjoy that so much because it's like, okay, I know that he's going to do it the right way. Sure. Or he's going to redo it if it doesn't turn out the right way. And that's so important. There's so many times, none of the shops that we associate with, right? But they'll take shortcuts. And I get it. You get the car out the door faster. That's more money. And nobody's looking. It's like, well, everybody's looking at what you do, not just today, but forever.
Sure.
So I applaud you for doing that. And I think those actions bring respect back to the blue collar. Sure, I really do. So,
and on that subject, the average public that isn't familiar, doesn't know details about cars, they don't know that there's a safety factor.
Yeah.
They think they take their car to a body shop. When they get it back, if it looks like a car again, they don't realize that the airbags might not deploy properly if the car wasn't fixed properly. All they know is, I have airbags again. Yeah. They don't comprehend that. And
you're absolutely right. You were just talking about on one of your recent videos about a different type of weld that you had to do because this is an important part of the frame structure, and if I use this extra hot welding method, then it's going to deteriorate. Whereas I've got to use this cooler welding method, otherwise it's not going to be to the standard that the industry puts out.
Right.
So it's like when you think about it that way, again, if something would happen, the old cars, you as the driver would absorb all of that. Yeah. Now the car absorbs it. You want the engine to go wherever so that, again, the occupants are protected.
Sure.
If you don't do your job right, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, 100%.
So, it's again, I think bringing that to the general public, as you said, people have to have respect for what you're doing.
Sure,
It's like, wow, when you think of it that way.
Yeah.
Again, you're as the plumbing department always says, you're protecting the health of the nation, and that's true for plumbing. The water that you drink, you expect it to be safe to drink.
Yeah.
You're not going to test it. You expect when you get it out of the tap, you drink it, and you're going to be healthy. And the water that you don't want to drink, you expect that to go to the right place.
Right.
And if it's not plumbed correctly to code and to standard, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
Or you'll get smells coming from your plumbing or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Leaks, which could be a disaster if it's not done right. And
so I think if people would realize that those blue collar jobs really do play such a huge role in the health of our nation, I think there'd be more respect for it. But you're right, people don't look at it from that perspective.
Right.
And
the blue collar trades are a lot higher paying jobs than people realize.
Yep.
People view those as, in general, a lot of people view them as lower paying careers, and not in today's world, at least.
Yeah.
Maybe 30 years ago it was. I don't know, but today's world, there's a lot of very, very good paying jobs.
There is.
Trades.
I think historically, number one, people looked at the trades and it was like, oh, well, that's where people go if they can't succeed at college, right? It's like, oh, well, quote unquote college. That's where people go into the trades if they can't make it there. That's where the troublemakers go. That's just not true. It's just not true. And you're absolutely right. And again, I look at your industry. First question I ask whenever I meet a ranking graduate, and I didn't have to ask you this, is where are you working? And always they'll tell me they're working, which is great because that's what we're all about, right? Are you working your chosen career field? Number two, most of them are not really worried about, where is that next job going to be, because they find out they can work as much or as little as they want to. I'm sure if you wanted to go out and make tons of overtime doing collision repair, you could do that.
Sure. Wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a problem.
And finding it, if I wanted, I've been with the same company for over 15 years, but
which congratulations on that, by the way. That's awesome.
If I wanted to leave tomorrow, I could have have a different job tomorrow. No question about it.
And that's good because, you've got a family to take care of, and it's like that's a great feeling to not have to worry about that.
Right.
But it's also important to know that, I can provide for my family. You can make a really decent living.
Yeah.
Really, really decent living, and not have all that super debt that is typically associated with the four-year universities. A lot of times, doctors make lots of money, but they go into so much debt to become a doctor. Yeah. Where it's like
so many years of schooling that they could have been working, if they're in school for 10 years or whatever it might be, that's 10 more years of their life that they're missing out on.
So, the trade, just like anything else, you can make it as much or as little as you want. Yeah. But none of the career fields that we represent, are great jobs. And every one of them. If the great jobs weren't available, if great job opportunities weren't available, we wouldn't offer that as a career. And again, it's amazing money. Yeah. It's amazing money, which is a challenge for us as well. And what I mean by that is ultimately, as I said, we hire professionals out of the career field. So, we then compete with the shops and the industries to attract great faculty to come teach for us.
How difficult is that?
Oh, it's very difficult because we are competing. There's so many job opportunities. And as you just said, there's a lot of money to be made in the technical careers, in the blue collar jobs. There's a lot of money to be made. So when you step up and start saying, come work for us, a private non-for-profit, right? That becomes a challenge. So fortunately, a lot of the people that are working for us, they really, number one, buy into that mission. We're very mission driven. Number two, they have that strong desire to help people. They're not teaching at Rankin to become rich. They're teaching to become rich in other ways. In the fact that the same reason why you're doing this, right? I want to interest more people into the career field. I want to pass my knowledge on. They want to help people.
Sure.
And we're very fortunate that our faculty do want to help people, and they're interested in people getting into those technical careers.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, but your people were trying to hire me to come teach last year. They were calling me.
Smart for them. Whoever did that, I'll tip my hat to them, because we'd love to have you as a faculty member. If you ever decide
too much going on.
Well, if you ever get bored, we got part-time opportunities, full-time opportunities. We'd love to have you there.
Sure. No, I told them, I was like, I'm sorry, but doing what I'm doing right here is a second full-time job. Yeah. So
I understand.
It's hard to keep up with everything. But
if you ever change your mind, let us know.
Sure. But I will also note, while I'm thinking about it, whenever I said a minute ago that I could go get another job tomorrow if I wanted to, that's not because I'm blue collar Kyle.
Yeah.
That plays a factor, but anybody in the collision industry with experience could get another job tomorrow. That's how desperate a lot of these businesses are for people.
Well, as Gene was saying in the last podcast, there's a lot of shops that if you would bang your car up right now, and it's going to go to the shop and it has to wait, because there's such a waiting list and a waiting line for the cars to get in and get fixed and get out. And a lot of time it's because the technicians, the shops, they would hire more technicians if there were available, but they're not available. So again, if you have skills and you've demonstrated what you've done, and again, for you, you have this online portfolio of all the work that you've done, which is amazing. Sure. And I think that makes anybody a lot more valuable when people say, well, yeah, look at what I've done. Sure. I'm sure you could go out and find a job at any shop that you wanted.
Sure. Yeah. Now, since you guys started doing the 8 on, 8 off program where people are in the industry, have you seen employers become a lot more happy with those, with that type of setup?
Yes and no. I think number one, a lot of the employers are happy because number one, they have input. So, I love the fact we partner with industry. I love the fact that industry plays a role in what you're learning, how you're learning it, what you're doing. And now we're getting that input right away. So since they're getting to see the students every 8 weeks, 4 weeks, 16 weeks, or whatever, because we've got industries that are rotating at different rotations.
Gotcha.
They can have input right away and say, you know what, that student that we got, they're lacking this. We need more of this. We need to change that. And we can change it right then and there for that student. So by the time they rotate out again, we made an adjustment, we've changed, and now the student's better prepared. Right. Whereas before, it's like, well, the student graduated, and the input will help the next students, but your input's not going to help that current student. So that's definitely a plus. Now, the downside, if you will, is this. So again, it's just expected that if you hire a ranking graduate, that they're technically competent. So imagine the shops that are used to hiring ranking graduates, they're at a level where they know in the collision, they know the detailing, the estimating, they know the non-structural, the structural, the painting, refinishing, the mechanical. They graduate, and when you hire them, they know all these. Well, now you got to realize that student coming out in 8 weeks, they only know those foundational skills. They know the safety, they know the beginning. They don't know everything. So in some cases, it's an adjustment because you got to realize that now you're part of that educational process. So the ranking, quote-unquote, student, not grad because they didn't graduate yet, right? They're learning those things and they will get those things, but they're not there yet. So that's an adjustment, right? If you've hired a ranking grad and they come out knowing all this, and now they're only knowing 8 weeks worth, sometimes that's an adjustment, right? So it's been a learning curve for everybody involved. And again, we're always looking for input. How do we make it better?
Sure.
How can this educational process become even better yet? And I know that we can be better, right? The minute I say we can't be better, then I'm not the right person for the job anymore, right? Sure. I know we can do a better job, and industry is going to tell us what we can do to be better. And we've got to listen to industry and make those adjustments, right?
And the employer has to understand that they're hiring somebody who's still in the middle of their... The employer is a little bit of an educator themselves as well.
Absolutely, they are. Have to be. So because that internship is a class, the students are getting graded.
Oh, they actually get a grade.
They do get a grade, and there's an instructor that's a part of it. At the shop, there's typically a coach or a mentor that the shop provides, but then there's a teacher that is talking with that student on a regular basis to, well, what are you doing? Are you progressing? Are you doing what you're supposed to? If there is a challenge, it's not like we just take an intern and throw them out there. Right. We want to make sure that the intern and the shop whatever shop that may be, whether it be collision, automotive, machining, welding, doesn't matter. We want to make sure that it's a fit. It doesn't do anybody any good if we put a student at a shop and it's not a fit. So we're very clear in the expectations. And again, if the shop needs help, we're here to help them. If the student needs help, we're here to help them. But it's just like you were talking about that inside ranking, there's still, you've got to, and it's good because what happens is the students start talking about what they're doing, and the student may get one experience at shop X and another student may be getting a different experience at shop Y. So now they're communicating about what they've seen at the different places and how the different places do it. So it brings all of that experience under one umbrella so that the students can at least benefit. Again, the primary benefit is the one doing it, right? But at least they get to hear about it, how different shops do things. Yeah. So that's important too. And the industry, they get to do that as well. They'll learn from each other. It's like, oh, well, you're doing this with an intern. Well, we can do it this way as well, or we can make this change, or I'm doing this. Have you thought about doing it this way? So again, it's collaboration.
Now, do most of the programs at Rankin, I'm familiar with the automotives, but do most of them do a on and off type of thing, like as far as plumbing or electrical, or do they do things like that too?
Some do and some don't.
Just a mix.
And ultimately, even with some of the programs. So we offer diesel in Perryville, and we also offer diesel out at Wentzville. And it's the same degree, but how they're teaching it is very different. So in Perryville, that curriculum is really embedded into industry. So they are at a shop and they're working in the shop, a live shop all the time. Whereas
the entire program?
The entire program.
Is it, so do you have a Rankin instructor?
We do.
In the shop?
Yep, absolutely. Multiple instructors that are in that shop. So we are the workforce, right? Out at Wentzville, it's more of that rotation. In some cases, we have programs where the students are with us for a full semester because they've got to be there for at least one full semester to get the core foundational skill sets to be able to be productive. And then they rotate out. So there's all different makes and models. And again, we listen to industry, not only what to teach, but how to teach it. So there's different educational models out there that we're running across the board, even within the same program. Diesel, great example. Welding is another great example. We got welding where, there's internships, rotation, and then there's also just the straight traditional, hey, you start at this point, you end at this point, graduate, get a job.
Gotcha. Now, I'm curious to learn more about this diesel program.
Sure.
Now, you guys put that in Perryville, and you put it in a shop. Was that because that shop was in desperate need of mechanics, and
you're right on.
Partnered with them in a way?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's a shop, and they have an entire fleet of trucks to deliver product, and at the end of the day, that product has to get delivered. It has to get delivered. So
like semi 18-wheelers?
Yeah. So they've got 300, 400 tractors, 1,000 trailers. They take and they literally deliver their product across the nation. And the customer, the stores, the retail stores and all that, they don't care about your truck broke down. They need product at a particular point in time. Product has to be delivered. So in that case, well, if the truck's broke down, you can't find somebody to fix it, well, then you have to go out and buy a new truck. Well, that gets very, very expensive, right? So they had a group of trucks sitting in a parking lot that were just waiting to be fixed. And it's like, again, a lot of times people say, well, why'd you go to Perryville? Why'd you go to Wentzville? Industry is the ones who brought us down there. In all cases, it's industry saying, hey, we need a technical workforce. So brought us in, and the first job was, hey, we got these trucks in the lot. Can you fix them? So yeah, we focused on the students fixing the trucks, the tractors, fixing them and getting them back up so they can be on the road. Pretty soon when you're in a live shop, and this, it's great to do that, but sometimes when there's a car that pulls in that needs to come in and go out because the driver is waiting, hey, could you come over here and help us on this? Because at the end of the day, that truck is sitting waiting, this has to be done because there's a driver waiting. It has to be done now.
Right.
So, hey, Rankin students, could you come over and do this? And yeah, so pretty soon we started doing that. Well, before you know it, we're part of that production shop where we are the workforce, not just fixing what's waiting, but then also fixing what needs to be done on a daily basis. So, you wake up on a day like yesterday where it's winter outside,
Yeah.
And the diesel fuel's gelled. It's like, okay, well now today we're going to learn how to get diesel engines up and running in cold weather, right? So it's very dynamic, and it's definitely a different environment to learn in and to teach in. But you got to be flexible.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing with education. You know this from industry. You got to be flexible because, you know, you think the car is going to be fixed today, and then you find out that the part's not going to be in or this not. So it's like, okay, well, it still has to go out the door. So now where else can I find that part, or how can I make that part to still accomplish the objective? You know, you can't just drop everything and say, well, it's just not going to happen.
Sure.
Industry doesn't allow for that.
That's fat. I would love to maybe sometime in the future, if there's opportunity, I'd love to go out there.
We'd love to have you tour the facility. Yep.
See how that works. That's
absolutely, because it's actually worked so well that we've actually expanded it into other shops now. So we'd love to have you come visit the partners that are doing that. And it really is kind of, again, you know, when you went to school, it was more of the traditional. Now they're doing a rotation, and that's even a different model yet, where it's like you're embedded, you're totally immersed. So when you ask those students, are you in class or are you at work? They don't know the answer. It's one and the same for them, right?
It's both at the same time.
It's both at the same time, which is perfect, because if you can get education and industry to meld like that, then it's great, because students don't know that they're learning.
Yeah.
You know, that's really the perfect learning environment.
Does that diesel shop, I assume it has to be a very large facility, I would imagine. Do they have a classroom set up as well for any of the book work that has to be taught?
So the classroom setup is actually at our building. So we've got a building right across the street from one of the shops.
Oh, okay.
So the students commute over to ours for that classroom work, even though I will tell you, and you know this, students learn best by doing, right? So anything that we can teach in a hands-on environment by doing versus the reading, writing, we do. So the more we can implement with a hands-on approach, and really it challenges that instructor, because it's like, again, let's spend very little time in that traditional classroom, more time in the shop, and let's figure out how else can we educate these students in those. You know, health and safety has to be done in those classrooms, right? But how else can we educate those students and they still get those objectives and those competencies, but yet let's do it in a hands-on environment. Yeah. So is the classroom really necessary? And in some cases, the answer is yes.
Sure. And
in other cases, the answer is, well, no, not really.
Right.
You know, I'll tell you, welding is a great, and you're a welder, so you know this, you know, best way to weld is weld.
Right.
And a lot of times, you know, our teachers at Rankin, they'll show you what a good weld looks like, and they'll put you on a welder, and they'll say, just try it.
Right.
You know, and a lot of times you'll learn how to make that weld then look right by just changing things and doing things and playing with it, if you will, right?
Sure.
Versus me telling you, oh, dial this, dial that, because one welder maybe set one thing, and then you change the color of the welder, right? You go from a red or a yellow or a blue welder, and now it's a different setting. So, you know, a lot of times it's just you getting in there and feeling comfortable enough
in the touch of the actual person. Some people weld faster than other people.
Absolutely.
And you have to adjust per that.
So it's again, by all means, you got to be safe. You got to be healthy. You can't put students in an unsafe or unhealthy environment. But a lot of times just doing it, trying it, saying, okay, now you know what you don't know, so let's take it from there.
Sure.
Because that's the other thing with Rankin and a lot of our programs. You know, you may come in and you may know something about collision. You may have had some experience. You may have, you know, been in a shop before. You may have gone through a great high school program that has exposed you to it. But then the person right next to you doesn't know the difference between a flat end and a Phillips screwdriver, right? Yeah. So how do you take both of those students and keep them occupied, but yet realize you've got to get them to the same level by the time that they go out there to that shop.
Right.
So, you know, there's got to be an individualized learning component that allows you, the person that has some experience, to excel and yet give the attention to those students that need it, that again, just have never touched a screwdriver, which we love. We welcome everybody there. You know, you don't have to have a prerequisite knowledge to get into our programs.
Right.
We expect that you're coming in knowing nothing.
Right.
But we don't want to bore you to death where it's like you're bored to death if you do have some experience.
Right. But you have to assume that everybody doesn't know anything in the beginning.
Absolutely.
I remember learning what the tools were when I started at Rankin.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I already knew I knew it, but a lot of people didn't.
Yeah, they just never had the opportunity to touch those tools.
And a lot of those people that didn't turned out to be great technicians.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
they just had to be given the opportunity.
Exactly.
And they weren't given that opportunity at the same rate that you were,
Sure.
They didn't have that influence, whether it be through school or a family member, as you said, that made them work on a car or opened up the hood or whatever,
Yep. I remember when I was in high school, I was a horrible student. I wouldn't have graduated high school if it wasn't for the special ed teacher, Miss Wexler, who helped me tremendously, helped me a lot whenever I was in high school. Would have never graduated. I barely graduated. And when I went to Rankin, I had almost straight A's.
Yeah.
Even in my gen ed classes.
Yeah.
But the reason was because I cared about what I was doing.
Yep.
When I was in high school, like, I wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
I might have pretended to be stupid because I didn't care about what I was learning.
You were bored.
I was bored. I was bored. I wasn't interested.
Yeah.
And I knew that at the time, and I don't regret it. I have zero regrets as far as that go. But when I went to Rankin, I got almost straight A's because I was interested. I cared about what I was doing, and I saw a future. I saw a reason why I was getting that education.
Well, that's awesome. And a shout out to Miss Wexler, because again, we definitely enjoyed you as a student, and we enjoy you as a Rankin alum.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, we see that quite a bit. Students in high school, they may be labeled as a troublemaker because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But again, it's not because they can't or they won't. It's because they're bored. So they occupy themselves with other things.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, they get into trouble. But then again, at Rankin, we put you in a shop, right? We put you with the tools. We put you in front. We give you structure. We give you time, deadlines, expectations, and we hold you accountable to those.
Sure.
So just because you're not a straight A high school student doesn't mean you can't be successful in a blue collar job.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't. We've got many students that you just described that have done. You look at their high school transcript, and you say, "Oh my gosh, this isn't a stellar student," and then they excel at Rankin and they excel at the job, and it's amazing. And again, it's just because of the education methods, the teaching methods, and we know students learn best by doing, not by reading and writing and talking about it, but by actually doing it.
Yeah.
So it's a good formula. It's a great way to teach.
Yeah. And I found myself more interested in the gen ed classes when I went to Rankin.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the biggest memories I have of the gen ed classes is I remember I was in a public speaking class at Rankin. And we'd do a speech in front of the class, and there's 25, 30 people or whatever in there. And after a while I was getting bored with it because it felt like it was just I was talking in front of the same people. And I remember making a comment in front of the class to the teacher. I said, "Is there any way we could speak in front of other people rather than the class?" Well, then I remember the next class, they were all mad at me because they invited all of the upper staff to come and sit in the class. And there's a couple students that were actually really mad at me because I suggested this idea, and now they're having to speak in front of the president, whoever was. I don't remember who all was in there at the time, but they brought a bunch of the staff in the classroom to speak in front of, and there were some students that were really mad at me about that. But I felt like I was at the point I want to speak in front of more people.
Absolutely.
And it was repetitive.
And they may have been mad at you, but I'm sure that there's some number of those students that now appreciate it because you realize that public speaking is important, right?
Yeah.
Even you can do all the work that you want, even in your industry, but if you can't document what you've done and you can't explain that in clear and simple English to the customer, then they're not going to want to pay for it. And especially with insurance companies, right? They want every detail. What did you do? How did you do it? Did you do it the right way? And you've got to be able to document that. So you've got to be able to communicate verbally and orally, and written. Verbal, oral, same thing. But you got to be able to write it and speak it in a way that people can understand it. So that was a good exercise. I'm glad you did that. It was a great. Clearly, the teacher thought it was a good idea because they implemented it. So
they ended up doing it.
So good job.
Yeah, I don't know if they did it anymore after that, but I remember they did it when I was there, and that was probably one of my favorite. Turned out in the beginning it wasn't, but it turned out to be one of my favorite gen ed classes when I was there.
It's good
for that reason. So
that's very good.
I like that. Yeah. So how did you end up in this position?
How did I end up in this position? Talking to Blue Collar Kyle? No,
I mean,
no, I understand. I understand. So ultimately, I'm a ranking grad myself. So very similar story to you.
You were? Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Okay. I'm a ranking grad. So I went to Rankin, went out and got a quote unquote real job. And one day they called me up and they said, "Hey, would you like to teach evening school, part-time adjunct in the evening?" I said, "Sure, I'll try that." And then they said, "Oh, after a period of time, would you like to teach full-time?" And I said, "Absolutely not." And now I've been there, 28, 29 years.
You ended up doing it anyway.
Yeah, I ended up doing it anyway. So again, Rankin's near and dear to my heart. I absolutely believe in our mission. I believe in what we do. And I do absolutely appreciate the fact that we change people's lives, right? I love hearing the success stories. So, it's one of those things that, as you do, you work hard, you put the time in, you put the effort in, and you just start continually making suggestions and changes. So you move from an adjunct teacher to a full-time teacher to a department chair to, a dean and a vice president and then a president. So
you just kind of worked your way up the ladder, basically.
I worked my way up the ladder from being an adjunct all the way up. So
Gotcha, wow.
And I guess from being a student all the way up, right?
Right.
So like I said...
that's really neat.
The
fact that you went there too.
Yeah.
I didn't know that part.
Yep. So my father's a Rankin graduate.
Oh, wow.
So I always knew of Rankin growing up because he was very proud of that. And my son.
What did he do? What did your father
So
do?
he went in the machining program.
Okay.
Back then it wasn't called precision machining or advanced manufacturing. It was just machine shop. And way back then, you could stick around and learn tool and die as well. So he did all that. And then, as I was saying, my son's a Rankin graduate too. So I really believe in what we do. It's definitely changed my life, and I've seen it change other people's lives. A lot of times, you talk about the industry and universities and four-year colleges and students. There was a point in time where if you were a student and if you weren't destined for that four-year university, that a lot of times you were kind of written off, right? That's like, well, there's no option for you. And I've seen us time and time again take those students. They really find that spark at Rankin. They're great students. They become great employees, and they become productive members of society. And we've changed their lives, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where they provide for their family. Time and time again, we've changed that course, whereas before they didn't know what they were going to do. They were kind of pushed into the trades because it's like, well, there's nothing else. And, mom and dad maybe got tired of them living in the basement or whatever. So it's like they're kind of pushed there. They found their calling.
Sure.
And they've made great careers, and they've climbed the ladders, and it really is amazing.
Now, back to our conversation at the beginning of this, the high schools.
Yes.
Do you guys, I know a lot of these high schools don't have very good funding.
Yeah.
Particularly for the automotive programs, and I'm sure a lot of them, they're kind of at the bottom of the totem pole mm-hmm. as far as high schools go.
Sure.
Is there anything that Rankin does to help those high schools expand their programs? Because those high schools are probably feeding Rankin
absolutely.
a large percentage of students, I would imagine.
So yeah, it's definitely a problem. Number one, doing technical education right is expensive. Mm-hmm. As expensive. Even with the automotive, parts aren't cheap, paint's not cheap. Yeah. With carpentry, wood's not cheap. With machining, metal's not cheap. With welding, the gases and the metal's not cheap. So to do it right, it's very, very expensive. Yeah. And I understand that when you're in a school system and you have a budget and you have to make a decision and you say, okay, well, I can put 12 students in this class and it's going to cost me this much, or I can put 50 students in this class and it's going to cost me a fraction. I understand why they cut those programs. And that's sad because, again, then the students aren't even exposed to what technical careers are. So number one, again, a shout out to those schools that have those type of programs and the teachers that teach in those programs. They're absolutely awesome. They're wonderful, and they're giving these students exposure and opportunities that they just couldn't have other places. What do? We try to support the high schools whenever and wherever we can in the career centers, whether that be, for example, bringing them to campus and allowing them to use equipment that they may not have, if they need that exposure. If it's participating with dual enrollment, we actually have quite a few dual enrollment students who are dual enrolled. So that means they're earning their high school diploma and their college credential at the exact same time. In fact, our workforce development in Troy, Missouri, it's a workforce development center, and it has a huge dual enrollment with the Troy school system because Superintendent Dr. Mark Penny really thought it was important that their students have opportunities, realizing that not everybody's going to go to a 4-year degree granting institution like, doctors, lawyers, whatever. So he wasn't necessarily happy with the opportunities that were in that. So he approached us and said, hey, is there any way you could give our students some of the opportunities in the careers that you represent? We said, absolutely. So built a facility. We're there doing just that. So dual enrollment's a great opportunity. Of course, there's other programs, whether it's bring the students to Rankin or whether it's us coming to you. We've got faculty all the time that will take, I'll use automotive. So a lot of schools don't have the hybrid or the electric vehicles. Right. So our instructors will get in those vehicles, drive them to the schools, take them apart
at the high schools,
and then work with those high schools to put that car back together, which is a big risk, right? Because now they have to get that back together so they can drive back to school. Sure. But at the end of the day, it's again sharing that. So anything we can do to help the high schools, and again, all the organizations, even, the ones that were mentioned in your previous podcast with John, Enterprise Mobility does a ton. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Enterprise Mobility now does a ton to help schools, including us, including the high schools, the career centers. Gene and all the organizations that he's involved with does a huge, and anytime we can contribute and help, absolutely, we want to do that. So could we do more? Absolutely. And again, we're open to those ideas. If somebody has that idea like, oh, could you do this? It's like, again, sure. Let's look at how we can work together to make this happen.
Sure, to talk about it.
Sometimes it's hard. Paint booths are very expensive. It's hard to take a paint booth and move it from school to school. But again, there's lots of industry. There's lots of other schools that, if a school needs that kind of access, what can we do to work with the industry partners that we have to make that happen, to make that an opportunity for those students. Sure. If it's not possible to bus them to Rankin. Schools, and again, I can't give enough of a shout out to those high schools and those career centers doing that every day, because what they're dealing with is having to, the schedules today are so much more complicated than what they used to be, right? So these students are coming in, they're trying to get this work done, they're having to do more with less time, less resources, and it just becomes a logistical nightmare. So in some cases, busing students from point A to point B, the cost and just the time, it's not possible. So, you have to get creative, and I tip my hat to all those instructors out there because they are creative. Right. They participate in the Rankin Automotive Days. They participate in the events that we have. So
they're making things work the best they can with the resources they're given. Yep. Because like you said, it's way cheaper for a class to have 30 computers and you don't need any materials after that, and you could just teach programming. But if you're gonna fix paint cars, every time you spray that paint, you got to restock that paint.
Absolutely.
That's expensive.
Which we do the computers and we do the programming too. We have an IT division. Sure. That's one of our core divisions. But you're right. And for the schools, it's even better yet to have just a lecture hall, right? Where it's a lot easier to just sit and lecture to students for 50 students at a time or even wherever.
There's very little cost.
Yeah,
you're just
very low cost versus putting them in a shop where there's electricity, power, concrete, materials, all the consumables that happen.
Right.
So
yeah. No. So what program is the most popular program at Rankin?
So that's a great question, and there's multiple ways to answer that, right? I will tell you, typically our automotive division is the most popular for students, and what I mean by that is everybody can relate to the automobile, right? They don't all own cars, but they can at least relate. But there's also very popular programs. The electrical division is very popular, especially from the employer perspective, because a lot of times our employers, they're looking for people that are multi-skilled, multi-crafted. So, they're wanting to hire somebody that knows electricity, robotics, instrumentation and process control. So we've got programs such as industrial maintenance technology that are multi-skilled, multi-crafted, which are real popular with industry, but we do struggle to attract students into it. So, when somebody says, well, who's Rankin's customer? We actually have two customers, right? By all means, the students are customer. They're paying to be there. However, our number one customer is industry and employers.
Sure.
Because if we're not satisfying their need and what they want, then we're doing our students a disservice, right? If we train our students in a technology or a career that it's just not viable,
right,
then that's a waste of time.
Right.
We're not performing our mission, and
You're creating.
Doing what we're supposed to do.
It might sound silly, but you're creating a product.
Yep, we are,
and you want to create the best product possible.
You're absolutely right, and literally. So when you look at popular programs, you look at, well, what's popular with industry and then what's popular with students.
Sure.
Sometimes in the perfect world they line up, and then sometimes they don't.
Right.
Because it does become a challenge. When you ask a student, oh, well, what is instrumentation and process control? Again, unless somebody has been in that industry or they've been exposed to it, they have no idea what that means.
Right.
So they don't know what
does that mean?
So it's really automation, right? So it's part of our electrical division. We call it control systems technology, but it's really instrumentation and process control. So when you look at, if you look at the cars being manufactured. Mm-hmm. So I was fortunate enough to be at one of the Toyota motor manufacturing facilities the other day, and they were making great vehicles, and there was 3 layers of cars on conveyor systems, and when they get painted there, it's a robot that is dipping them into the paint, and they come out and they're all painted, and then there's another robot that is doing the spot welding. It's all of that you do. You have to undo it when it gets into a wreck, but it's the assembly line is doing it all via robots. And so the timing is very important. The process is very important. Instrumentation and process control is teaching that automation. So how do you make that happen? How do you make decisions based upon, if you're dealing with a liquid, a water treatment facility, based upon volume, temperature, all of those things? How do you program that? How do you calibrate that? You're seeing some of that in your industry. So for example, getting a windshield replaced, right? Mm-hmm. At one point in time, it's like, okay,
it's a chunk of glass.
Take the glass out, put the new glass in, you're done. Well, now it's okay. You got the new glass in, but guess what? It's not ready to go until you've calibrated the collision avoidance system and all the ADAS systems, right?
Yep.
Well, that's the instrumentation and process control, because guess what? You've done the repair, but now you haven't calibrated it, so the car is not going to register it, and now my lane keep assist isn't going to work, and so you've got to do that automation to make it all work.
Gotcha.
So it's all of that.
So a lot of people that graduate that program could end up in some sort of manufacturing facility operating. Probably well-paying jobs, I would assume, to operate these robots and make them function properly.
So they'll go to work as a quote-unquote traditional electrician. So, you plug something into an outlet, you just expect whatever you plug in to work. Sure. You don't worry about, where is that power coming from? How is it generated? How do I know that it's safe? Right. How does it protect my equipment? All the way up to, yes, I'm in a production facility, and I'm responsible for keeping this production facility up and running. And it needs to be safe, it needs to be automated, it needs to be fast. How do I do that? All the way to, okay, now I'm at this hospital and I need to maintain the facilities. So, one day I may be doing a little carpentry. The next day I may be doing a HVAC system, which now the HVAC system isn't just HVAC, it's a building automation system, right? So it's all of these things tied together.
Gotcha. Interesting.
And we cover all those things. It's really interesting when you say blue collar, because that would be an interesting survey, right? Yeah. Is what do people believe is a blue collar job?
It's changed over time.
It has changed so much. Yeah. Even in the medical field, you think of nursing, for example, and nurses are still traditional nurses, and they do that, but now they're also expected with robotic surgery to be able to program that robot, because the doctor may be 1,000,000 miles away. So now they're the ones that are on that front end trying to make sure that this equipment's working.
And it's important that works.
It's very important.
Properly.
So there's this whole technical skill that the nurse has to now know. So again, it's changed so much. Even with, like, I keep going back to your industry because I'm a fan of your videos, and I learn your industry by watching your videos. But it's like all of those things that you're doing, even from when you started to what you're doing now, it's like, oh my gosh, all these things, the welding, the bonding, right? So sometimes you're not welding, sometimes you're bonding, sometimes you're using this type of fix, and then other car manufacturers require a completely different set of instructions. And it's like, oh, so this carbon stuff, it's not metal, it's not plastic, it's carbon fiber. How do you fix that? It's,
right.
And
it's changed drastically. Even since I've been in it, it's changed drastically.
So
and blue collar, it's definitely, it's evolved.
has.
People don't realize the term blue collar was created because people used to wear blue shirts,
blue
so they didn't show dirt
Yeah.
as well. That was where that originated from, but it's evolved
Yeah.
significantly since then.
So it would be interesting to find out, what does blue collar mean to you? What is it? And I have a feeling if you ask the older generation, it means one thing, but if you ask today's students, it means something completely different, right? And again, I credit you with doing that because you're bringing blue collar into those conversations that most people don't.
Right.
And you even hear things, white collar, blue collar. Now there's gray collar.
Yeah.
In the middle. So it's just it's exciting. It really is exciting when you look at the future of work. There's cars that drive themselves now, right?
Yeah.
So when it gets into an accident, you've always had to fix, of course, the dents and the dings and the structure and the engine and the transmission or the motor. Now you have to fix the driver as well.
Right.
So that's a completely different skill set that you have had to learn and to adapt to.
Right. And there's a lot of technology in that a lot of people might view as a white collar type of trade because you're using computers to program things, but that's the evolution of the blue collar.
Yeah. So I'll go back to John's podcast with collision engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll ask the question, are you an engineer?
In a way, yeah.
Yeah,
I would say so.
And I think if you would talk to a quote-unquote engineer from a Ford university, they say absolutely not, right? Because, however, I will tell you, again, from watching you, you've had to engineer some pretty genius ways to get this thing fixed and to get this dent to pop out, and you have to know, okay, this frame pulling rack machine, where do I hook it, where do I not?
Sure.
If every engineer had to turn the bolt on the back of the engine that can only be fixed if you remove the engine, right? It's like so.
Yeah.
So I think that word engineer is changing as well, and I do think a lot of our graduates are at least performing in those functions and doing those duties where they're having to quote unquote engineer. Versus what a traditional engineer does. Right. Again, we're not designers. We fix things, right? We troubleshoot things. We install things. But to sometimes fix those things, you have to engineer the solution to be able to do it. Because in some cases, especially with some of the new stuff you're working on, you go to the manual, and there's no manuals anymore right now. It's online, and it's not written yet. So, your YouTube videos are becoming that future manual for people. So it's like you're creating that as you're going along because it just hasn't been there before.
Sure.
So,
yeah. And I was listening to a podcast just this last week, a few days ago, and they were talking about how, I don't remember what podcast it was. They were talking about how people will view a doctor, for example, as being this extremely brilliant person. Mm-hmm. But I've never viewed it that way. They're very smart in their field. Yeah. That doesn't make them smarter than this person that works on cars. They just chose to study this thing, and I chose to study this thing, and I'm an expert in this thing, and you're an expert in that thing. It doesn't make that doctor more valuable than somebody who's an expert. They just chose to study different fields, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Even though I'll say a shout out to all the doctors out there. If I ever need you, I think you're brilliant.
It's not a disrespect by any means.
But you make a great point. At the end of the day, I think we're all quote unquote doctors of our own profession, right? Sure. You have to be. Sure. And just like I said before, you go to that doctor and expect them to quote unquote save your life, your health. Right. But at the same time, I'm putting my family's health and safety in your hands when you fix that collision, sure. when you redo that, or when you come in and you replumb my house, or when you fix the electricity, and I plug something in. I don't expect to get shocked and electrocuted.
Or have my house catch on fire.
Yeah. All of those things are so very, very important. Yeah. Again, we're all doctors of our own profession.
Yeah.
You have to be.
Yeah, 100%. Well, is there anything else you want to touch on while we're here?
I don't know. What other questions do you have for us? I mean, again, I appreciate what you do for the industry. I appreciate what you do for education as an industry and what you're doing for collision as an industry. And like I said, I wish I had a team of blue-collar Kyles for each and every industry that we represent. Right. You know, like I said, we've got 37 different programs that are grouped into 5 core divisions: automotive, manufacturing, construction, electrical, and information technology. And I think you are making those blue-collar jobs cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for the students and the influencers to understand that it's okay to, again, work with your hands for a living. There's nothing wrong with the dignity of labor.
And I encourage more people in the trades to become influencers. Maybe some more Rankin grads will become influencers.
I would love
it's going to
that.
happen. I mean, over time, it's becoming more and more a thing. But
and I think what a lot of people don't realize, and we talked about this a little bit before, is behind the scenes, all the work that you put into this, because this is a completely different, the videos that you put out, all of the information technology skills that you're using to produce your content. It's amazing that you were, again, disciplined enough to learn that and then apply that skill. Because in some cases, that's a whole nother blue-collar skill, right? Yeah. If you consider computers blue-collar, and we do in some cases. You've learned that blue-collar skill and now have applied it to this. And that's important because it's another tool that you have, right? I mean, computers, there's a point in time when computers in an automotive shop are never to mix, right? Oil and water. However, now that's your biggest tool. It's a tool in your toolbox.
And I see a lot of the old timers that fought computers when they first started coming around, never advanced. They became those
the dinosaurs, right?
Dinosaurs, exactly, because they refused to adapt to the next technology.
And that's a great point, because a lot of times, even cell phones, right? A lot of times people will fight like, oh, no cell phones, but yet I have a feeling when you're trying to learn something like, how am I going to post this new video on this new social media platform, because I can't keep up with all of them, right? I'm still on the MySpace thing. So it's like, well, how do you do that? Your first line of defense is to go to Google it, right? Or to go to that is your tool. Yeah. So a lot of times, our faculty, the challenge is how do you embrace that new technology, but yet, again, teach the students discipline enough where if your employer sees you on your cell phone, they know that, you're still being productive. You're still using that as a tool. You're not using it just to play games or to play around or to chat with whoever. Right. So again, a shout out to your employer too, because again, I realized that had to be a challenge for you when you went to them with this idea. Hey,
I when I had the idea, I went and sat down with the owner of the company, Scott Schaefer, and who he actually hired me originally. So he was my location manager when I started. So we had a pretty good relationship in the beginning, and I pitched the idea to him, and he said, go for it. They've never batted their eye since.
Yeah, I can only imagine it's been a great impact for them, because like I said, if I wanted my car fixed, I would say, hey, I want you to do it, because again, I think it's cool that it's documented. Yeah. I know you're doing it right because your video, there's evidence forever of what you've done. So it's like, hey, I want Blue Collar Kyle to do this because I get to see it. I get to watch it while it's happening.
Sure.
If you will. So I think that's completely changed. And I can only imagine that somebody in your shop probably thinks it's pretty weird that you're talking to yourself all the time.
Yeah.
While you're doing these things.
I've been doing it for coming up on 7 years now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just normal.
Everybody,
But I'm sure, it was weird for me at first. Yeah. It felt like I was talking to myself, but really those segments where I'm talking to myself are just very short little pieces is all it is. So, and now I don't even really think about it. It's just kind of habit more than anything. And
I think it's exciting, not just in collision, but where the industry is going. Again, I was looking at some of this augmented reality and virtual reality, and of course, artificial intelligence. There's software and there's tools out there where, the manufacturer is going to have you put on these goggles or these glasses, and you're going to be able to look and see what wires are inside the door and this and that, and they'll step you through it. It's like, wow.
That'll be a thing.
It's a thing.
I thought about buying those Apple Vision Pros.
Yeah,
and if they had cameras and stuff where I could film my content,
Yeah.
I would consider trying
Well,
it.
I think that's coming.
Yeah. Oh,
I think it's coming, and I think it's going to, again, challenge us, how we teach, and then also challenge industry, on how they're using that technology to make it more efficient, right? So I love the careers that we represent because it's always changing, and that's exciting. So,
and people want to hate on it, but it's the future.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
You could either adapt or you could become a dinosaur.
Yeah, you're right. And again, I do think it's important that those foundational skills are taught. You got to learn the basics, but then you have to be open to those new ways and all that as well.
That was part of the reason I was asking about like the book part of the diesel program is I do believe that there was a lot of stuff that I learned in the classroom at Rankin that was very important.
Yep, absolutely.
That if I was only on the shop floor, I might not fully understand that the way this frame rail collapses could affect the timing of the airbags, and that's
right.
an important part.
And it's so important that if there's an industry certification out there, whether it be an ASE or ICAR or whatever it may be, AWS, which stands for American Welding Society, and Amazon Web Services. We have acronyms that represent multiple things in different careers that we represent, but it's important that our curriculum match up to that and tie into that. Because again, if industry values that certification, that industry recognized certification, then our students should be coming out with those skills and with those certifications.
Sure.
So we always, whenever possible and whenever industry, again, requires it, we tie our curriculum to those industry recognized certifications. So, the challenge is, and again, you were a good student, so I never got a chance to meet you when you were a student. Typically I only get to meet the troubled students, right? But the challenge would be, how do you get the Kyles of the world to do that book stuff at home or even online, and then really take it so that when you are in the shop, we can capitalize upon it and even go farther with that hands-on. Right. So it's still important, but how do we get you to do that where, we're not reading to you, give you a reading assignment and then I read it to you the next day. It's like, well, you're not going to do the reading assignment. So how do I make it important enough that you take the initiative and do that? Then you come to class prepared, and we go into that shop. You have that skill set. Now we're applying it. We're doing what you just learned.
And the instructor's instantly going to know if they did their homework or not.
You're either going to be able to do it or not, right?
Yeah. Or if you don't understand it, you're going to at least know that they tried, but they didn't understand it. So they're going to ask questions.
And then that's what you focus on. Instead of focusing on what you already know or what you've grasped, focus on those things that need more attention. Right. And that's where the educational institutions have to go.
Sure.
But again, it's a challenge.
How many people do you graduate a year on at? Like
about 1,000.
About 1,000.
About 1,000. Now keep in mind we run all 3 semesters, fall, spring, and summer. So we start students in fall, spring, and summer. In some cases, we're even starting students every 8 weeks, right? To get
on and off.
Because the whole point of that 8 week on, 8 week off is so that the student can come to the classroom and rank in and learn what they need to learn there, but then they rotate out and they get that real world work experience at the shop. Well, we don't want to leave the shop without a technician. So when that technician rotates, while we have a student, they have a technician. At that 8 week point, their technician becomes our student becomes their technician.
Right.
So they have a full-time technician made up of 2 people, and we have a full-time student made up of 2 people.
Right.
So again, it allows them to have that flexibility.
And that's the goal, so the employer still has somebody in that, say it's an oil change position or whatever it might be.
So at the end of the day,
they don't lose that person at 8 weeks. They have another student rotate in.
So education should be a value added, right? It should be, when you can make education a value added piece of that industry, then they realize the value of it. Mm-hmm. So if they're taking on an intern, it shouldn't just be, we're doing this as a feel-good educational piece. No, it should add value. That intern should be a productive member of the shop. Right. So if there's a lack there, if they're not there, then clearly, we're not a productive member of the shop. We're not important, right? So we want that. We want to fill that gap. We want to show that it's important, and we want to be that value added. So we don't want to leave our industry partners just with a void where it's like, for 8 weeks, we had that rack full, and now for the next 8 weeks, it's just an empty rack. It's like, no. If we're going to commit to doing this, you said it, and I believe, again, I think you're very smart, and I agree with a lot of things that you say. Your word is everything. If you say you're going to do it, you do it. And likewise at Rankin, if we say we're going to do it, we're going to do it.
Right.
Which means that if we say we're going to put somebody out here that's going to be a productive member of your shop, I want it to be that, not just during those 8 weeks, but for the entire time. So it's important that these students, go through the summer, because as you know, the shops don't necessarily shut down in the summer, right? I mean, it's nice to have that summer break, but that's not the real world.
Right. And it's difficult. It's very difficult for shops to train within reason.
Yeah.
That's a difficult thing, because the shops have numbers they have to hit. So it's there's a fine median. I've worked with quite a few different people, and it's difficult. It's difficult, but employers also know that it's important, because you can't get people. You can't find people. And
you've got to start growing that pipeline, And I'll steal a line from Ron Reiling, who's big in the collision industry, right?
Yeah.
So, he always says this, because, companies a lot of times will say, hey, if I train my staff, what happens if I train them and they leave? They go off and they get a better job. And he always says, well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But what happens if you don't train them and they stay?
Yeah, that's a bigger problem.
It's a bigger problem, because now you've got a workforce that cannot compete with what you're wanting to do.
Yeah.
You can't put a sign on the door that says, oh, I'm only going to work on cars that are pre-2000. Pre-2K cars is fine, but in some industries you can get away with that, restorations, right, and all that. But most shops and most people, they want you to work on the car. They don't care if it's a 80s model or a 2025 model, right? It's like you're just expected to fix it and put it back on the road.
Sure.
So if you don't train your workforce, and we do that. So I could spot out that mission again, but if I had to summarize it, what we do is we create a technical workforce. That's what Rankin does. Rankin creates a technical workforce, and we do that in 3 ways. Mostly what we've talked about today has been what we call our undergraduate day program, and really that's geared towards exactly where your passion is. It's introducing these technical careers to young people. And it doesn't always have to be young, but it's the people that are not in the career, and it's creating more. So it's creating more collision technicians, creating more mechanics, more technicians, more electricians, more carpenters. So we're increasing the number of people that are in these blue-collar careers, right? That's undergraduate day. That's one thing we do. The second way we create a technical workforce is we upskill an existing workforce. So this, you have a collision shop, for example, and you want to get the latest and greatest iCar training. Well, we run those classes, so you can come back. Typically, it's in the evening. It could be a couple of nights a week, and we'll take an existing workforce and we'll upskill them. So think of a group of electricians that need to learn the latest and greatest National Electrical Code, or a group of collision repair technicians who now have to start working on hybrids, realizing that, that orange wire, what does that mean?
Right,
And it can be very dangerous if you don't know what that means. So we'll upskill an existing. And then the third thing we do is we do customized workforce solutions. So we'll partner with industry, and they may have industry knows they know their business better than anybody else. So we'll partner with them and we'll say, okay, well, what is the need and what type of learning experience can we develop, whether it be on-site or on campus, wherever.
Such as the diesel program.
Such as the diesel program, or it could be a 2-day environment. It could be a 1 week. It could be something as small as a couple of hours to multiple years. Well, we'll customize a workforce training solution for them. So maybe you got a new rack in your shop, and maybe the manufacturer doesn't have time. They'll work with us because we've already been trained. So then we'll send out one of our instructors to train your workforce on how to use that new piece of equipment.
Gotcha.
So it's a customized workforce solution. So those are the 3 ways that we actually create a technical workforce.
Gotcha. If you could add a new program to Rankin tomorrow, what would it be?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I am. And because it shouldn't be what I want, it should be what industry wants.
Sure.
The new program would be industry driven, and it would be, again, focused on what industry wants. So,
is there any of those that you see that could be an upcoming thing?
There's lots. So, if you go out and visit our Wentzville location, for example, I think I mentioned this before, we've got a hydrogen hub out there.
Right.
So, again, how are those technicians that are going to work with hydrogen, because it's very high pressure from what I understand, so it adds a whole different skill set to what we already do. How are those technicians going to be trained and prepared to work on it? Well, we've got to do that, because again, the company that we're working with, Votech, if they're going to sell hydrogen, right, they've got to have technicians that are able to fix it.
Right.
When you think of a hybrid vehicle, for example, a lot of times you think of gas and electric, right?
Right.
That's what people think of. Well, if you talk about hybrids in the diesel world, they're looking at hydrogen and diesel. So it's like, okay, our hydrogen electric. It's like, how do you convert this add-on to now allow this truck to run off of hydrogen while it's idling overnight at a rest stop so it's not burning the diesel fuel?
Right.
So, every one of our programs is almost a new skill set on a regular basis. And you're on our advisory boards, so you know that. We ask every year, what should we teach? You bring from the industry input in, and we change it. So, as you said, the program that you've gone through, it doesn't look anything like that today.
Right.
Not just in how it's taught, but in what we teach as well. Some of it's still there, right? The concepts, the core concepts, but the specific skills are changing. So, any program that industry needs, and there's a need, that's what I want to teach.
Gotcha.
And as long as, again, it meets our mission, is it end up with a technical career? Because again, I don't want to create a program or have a program where there's no job opportunities at the end, right?
Right.
Again, if we could teach people how to shoe horses all day long, but if there's not the need for people that are shoeing horses, then why would we do it?
Right. And that's a lot of the four-year universities have a lot of programs that are completely useless, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the challenge that a lot of times those bigger educational institutions have, especially some of the ones that are tied to, governing boards and all of that, industry says, hey, we want this. And so there's industry time and there's education time.
You're right.
And sometimes those don't line up. And at Rankin, we try very hard to make that line up.
Right.
So if there's an expected change, we need to change that right away. We can't wait for a year cycle. We can't wait till it's too late, because industry wants it done now. They're not on the education time.
Right.
They're on the industry time. So the closer you can align that industry and education time working together, the better off we're going to be. I hear a lot of times people will hire people out of institutions, and they'll have to then retrain them to put them to work. It's like, well, man, whatever educational institution that you're partnering with has failed you, because if you have to retrain the person, why not just go back to that educational institution, tell them what you want, and then again have them do that. That way you don't have to retrain right away.
Right.
So yeah, it's a challenge. You're right.
And to be fair, you guys, Rankin has grown drastically since I was there. When I was there was no dorms.
Yeah.
All the students, they shared the dorms at UMSL.
Yeah, we did.
They used
we had a partnership with UMSL, great partnership.
Yeah, at that time, the automotive program has been expanded significantly since I was there.
Yeah.
It's doubled in size probably, I would guess. There was no high performance program when I was there.
Yep.
I don't believe there was any of the Winsville locations, or I don't think any of those were there. It was only that one main campus.
Absolutely.
Is all that existed. So you guys, in the last, 17 years, whatever it is. Whatever it is.
It goes by fast.
It's grown significantly since then.
And again, it wouldn't be possible without the support from industry.
Right.
Again, industry is why we're so successful. Us listening to industry, and, again, we got great faculty. We got great employees. The employees really make Rankin what Rankin is.
Sure.
They got their heart and soul into that place. And as you know, again, I know you're still in touch with the faculty that you had. They care about their students. They care.
Mm-hmm.
They're attached. They're associated, and they want to see you be very, very successful. And then that's not just in collision; it's across the board in all of our programs.
Right.
So if it wasn't for the great faculty and industry support, we wouldn't be where we're at today. And a lot of times that faculty and that support is driven by our alumni. So again, if it wasn't for the great students, such as yourself, we just couldn't do what we do. We couldn't perform our mission. So again, thank you for being a great ambassador. Again, to blue collar jobs, to your current industry, and of course to Rankin. We absolutely love that you're a Rankin grad, and we advertise that as much as we can, because I think you represent us very, very well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming out and doing this with me.
Yeah.
It's been a
We appreciate
great
it.
conversation. I've learned a lot, and we'll see where everything goes in the future. So,
and you're welcome to tour any of our locations at any time. I will tell you if anybody wants more information about Rankin, because by the time I say it, a lot of times it's obsolete, right? So if they go to rankin.edu, www.ranken, rankin.edu, it's the best way to find out information about upcoming open houses and Discover Rankin Days and Shadow at Tech and what the programs are all about. And again, we love visitors. Come and visit us at any of our locations. Again, you're welcome.
Don't just show up
anytime. You can just show up if you want, as long as we're there. You can just show up. We'll give you a tour as long as it's during quote unquote normal business hours. If we're there, we'll show you around. We'll give you a tour. We'll do whatever.
Gotcha.
Is it easier if you schedule it? Absolutely, because we can be prepared, right?
Gotcha.
If we're prepared and you schedule it, we can make sure that your time with us is well thought out and well planned. And
you guys have days specifically for high school students to come out and actually get proper tours, Shadow at Tech type of days, and everything else, which is very valuable, I feel like.
There's days that are specifically geared towards that. Again, you mentioned Shadow at Tech, which is a great program. Rankin.edu has all that information. But I will say, if that doesn't fit your schedule, just let us know when it does. Call us, contact us. You can, again, we've got chat bots and things like that now, right? All the technology. Give us a chat and we'll set up a schedule where you can come out and visit it, and we'd love to show you the place.
There you guys go. Check it out, rankin.edu. Talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.